Greetings and welcome to another video by Sir Mike the Hedge Knight. We have the Faction Revamp, the first major, and I mean major, they've made some big changes before. This is a major change. We're breaking this video up into at least two parts. Right now I'm looking at two, so the more that I talk about it, the more I realize, oh wait, we have to talk about this, we have to talk about that, and oh, what about that? There's a lot going on. So what we're going to do in this part is I'm going to do sort of a wide angle lens overview of what they did very quickly. And then I want to get into the 12 factions and talk about their new buffs with some commentary on the changes from their old buffs to the new and certain things that I think are imbalanced. I'm going to try to keep the griping to a minimum. It's not easy. I'm going to sort of skip to the end just for a second. Like, I'm not happy. I am not happy with the revamp. I wasn't happy with the revamp going in. I felt it was a problem that didn't need to be fixed. And by fixing it, they've broken the game. So it's just, we'll talk more about that at the end, about certain specific things, but that is my general thought. It's not all bad. There are a couple of things that were interesting, and it does make the game feel a little fresh if it wasn't completely broken. So the completely broken aspect of it, and the fact that we're a few days in and there's very little response from the moderators on the official Discord. A lot of things, hey, we're escalating this, we're looking into it. Well, there's an Ario bug where people are basically killing dragons with one shot or two, denying other alliance members the opportunity of getting their rewards. How that wasn't fixed immediately by simply turning off his or reverting his leadership to the old ability or doing something. I mean, that is catastrophic. That is catastrophic. That one person can hit for 14 million to a dragon, and it's ripping alliances apart. We've already had infighting. We lost a member because of it, and here we are 4 days later, and no resolution. So we're going to do a top-down look at everything. We're going to go over the faction bonuses. I'll touch briefly on leadership abilities. I don't want to get too much into. I might pick out one or two to talk about specifically, but they changed so many leadership abilities. That would be a whole different video going through every leadership ability that they've changed. We'll talk a little bit about bugs, and then I will sort of reiterate some of my complaints and add a couple of others toward the end. In the next part of the video, I'll talk more about dual factions, team construction under the new revamp, strengths and weaknesses of it, go over the 8 new characters or 8 existing characters that were granted a second faction so that you can take advantage of the dual faction, and talk about some other combinations that have come up so far that have looked to be successful under the new revamp. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Why are we calling this a faction revamp? Under the old method, based on the number of characters or champions in your team of that faction, you would get a bonus, and the bonus would be sort of a sliding scale based on having more members of that faction. And what Zynga said was they felt that it was too restrictive and stifled creativity amongst the player base because, and I'll use Baratheons, which you see I have my Baratheon screen open. They said that the problem is the Baratheons. For example, if you had 3 members of the Baratheons, you had 25% gem damage bonus. If you had a 4th member, the bonus went up to 50, and if you added a 5th member, you went up to 100%, which was a very big jump from 4 to 5. So as they were rolling out new characters, now let's do a very small tangent here. What they say and why what they say their intentions are, what their spin is, and why they're really doing it, we can all speculate. My personal belief is, as I've said before, we're in the business to play a really good game and have fun. They are in the business to make money. So when they release a character like the Night King who has no faction, or they release a character like Dunk who has no faction, and Dunk has been widely popular. I mean, if you're in Gold 1, you see Dunk level 350 all over the place. So a lot of people spent money on Dunk. So they definitely made money there. But they probably made a lot of this money because people knew this revamp was coming. And the issue that, if you watch my Dunk video, the issue that I had with Dunk is that he had no faction. And I said, well, if I'm running Baratheons and if I put Dunk in for any of my 5 members, if I replace him with any, all of a sudden my Baratheons go from 5 to 4, I lose 50% gem damage. I said, Dunk is good, but is he going to compensate for losing 50% gem damage? And that was at least their spin. And to some extent, I agree with that. It was very restrictive that I couldn't necessarily mix and match characters as much as I wanted to because the faction bonuses for certain factions were very, very, very strong, and you wouldn't want to risk reducing their effectiveness just to add another player. So that was the idea behind it. So what did they do? They replaced every faction's faction bonus with a static bonus that if you have 3 members, you get it. If you have less than 3, you do not. If you have more than 3, it doesn't help. So 3 is now the magic number. Now you can run 5 Baratheons, and you will get the same bonus as if you had run 3. On the positive side of the ledger, well, now I can run 3 Baratheons, and I could throw in Dunk or Egg. I can throw 2 of anything in if I want. And they wanted to see more variety in, I guess, raid teams. I don't know if they care so much about war teams. I think it's more raid teams. They never liked when there was one meta team. And we may or may not talk about that later because there is already kind of a new meta. I thought it would take a few weeks. It took like 2 days for people to figure out the new meta, but that's neither here nor there. This goes back to when they nerfed the Greens. The Greens dominated the Iron Throne and raid I started the game about a year ago, and all the way through whenever they nerfed them, September, October type of thing. And they're still powerful on offense. They just took away their defensive capabilities so that a lot of people were able to at least beat them when they faced in raid. The Greens would beat them, then they could get revenge and they could beat them back type of thing. And once they did that, I really felt like there was diversity in Gold 1. I've mentioned this before on the official Discord, but there were Baratheon teams and Stark teams and still some Green teams, and there were Targaryen fire teams and there were Black fire teams. There were Shield teams until they nerfed Brienne, and now you don't really see Shield teams anymore because they completely destroyed that style of play. There were others that are eluding me at the moment. So there was some variety. They went ahead and did this, and again, the flip side of this, why do they really do it? Probably to encourage sales. They released a character like Dunk. They need people to buy him. They don't want people to be hindered by the idea like, oh, I can't fit him into my team. And as they're rolling out new characters, they want people to be able to buy those characters and be able to slide them into any team they have. Like, hey, if I've got 3 members of a faction that work well together, I could put any other 2 in there. So OSHA's coming out soon. Maybe somebody wants OSHA and says, free folk. I'm not running free folk. Well, now that doesn't hinder you. So that was the idea. So what I want to do now is let's go faction by faction. Let's talk about the bonuses. And the one thing I'll say before that, or perhaps, let's just get it out of the way now. You can, because the magic number is 3, and because there are dual faction champions, and a lot more now than there were a week ago, you can set up a team that has at least 3 or more members of 2 different factions. Right now, there is no possible combination for a triple faction. I've checked, I've done the math, I crunched the numbers, I looked it over, I was beating my head against the wall. I really thought there was a way, and as of right now, there's no way to do a triple faction. So what does that mean? And you see on this page, there's a whole bunch of Baratheons. Blue Joffrey in the upper right corner is a member of both the Baratheons and the Lannisters. So if I use him with any 2 other Baratheons here, I've got 3 Baratheons on my team, but he's also a Lannister. Now you throw in 2 more Lannisters, and now you are a dual faction team. You have 3 members of the Lannisters, you get their bonus, and you have 3 members of the Baratheons. So now let's go into what each faction bonus does. Now, every faction, and I didn't like this at all, every faction, as long as you have 3 members of any faction on your team, gets a 25% gem damage bonus. And my biggest problem with that is gem damage was sort of the niche of the Baratheon family. It's why I played them. And I feel like the Faction Revamp has now stripped their identity. You can get gem damage bonuses. You can make a Blacks Targaryen team. So you have 3 members of the Blacks and 3 members of the Targaryens. You get 25% gem damage for each. That's 50% gem damage. Well, that's just as good that's better than a pure Baratheon team. And but this other faction does fire, and the Baratheons don't do fire. So I really feel like they hurt the Baratheons, but more importantly, they stripped away the identity of a lot of these teams. The Starks used to have ice have a greater impact, and a lot of their members, a lot of ice teams are comprised of a lot of Starks. Well, that's now gone. So now you can have a Stark team with ice, but they don't do anything special with ice. Things of that nature. So let's jump in. Here are the Baratheons. Let's click on any one of them. We'll start with Davos. In the upper left corner, you'll see a little flag that's always been there. You will now see for dual faction champions 2 flags, and we will see that during the course of this video. Clicking on the flag, we'll bring up the faction screen and you will see, as I said, 25% gem damage and 30% attack. Now, a couple things. One, and we'll get into this more when we get to the bug section, the attack bonus is not working. I tested it myself. I sensed it was not working. I tested it myself, took a bunch of screenshots, put it on the official Discord, explained everything. It's not working for skills. It's not working for gem damage. I think at some point I was doing 4 more points per gem with the Baratheon bonus. And I don't mean 400 or 4,000. I mean 4. So, unless you have a bunch of level 1 characters, 4 points of damage, not going to do so much. So I posted it there, and the reply was, oh, they already know about this. No, I didn't see that. I think they deleted that thread. But, the common boilerplate response we get now is they are aware of it. They're looking into it. Have they fixed anything? No, haven't bothered. So, they'll fix it when they fix it. But now let's assume that it does work. These faction bonuses will apply to all team members. So if you have 3 members of the Baratheons, like I said before, including Blue Joffrey, and 2 other members of the Lannisters, let's say Jaime and Cersei will also get this. They'll get the gem damage, and they'll also get the 30% attack benefit. Moving on to the blacks, looking at the upper left for the new purple Rhaenyra Targaryen, you'll see 2 symbols. They look very similar. I couldn't tell you which one is the blacks and which one is the Targaryens. Oh, it looks like the black dragon is the blacks and the black background with the white dragons, Targaryens. Opening up the faction screen, you'll see there are now 2 tabs. We've seen this with Bran and the Night King for characters they introduced that had minions. So now they're putting some tabs in. The blacks faction, in addition to gem damage, gets 30% defense. That is a very strong buff. Flipping over to the Targaryens, even though I'm jumping out of order a bit, but they are last alphabetically, 25% durability. Durability is very good against enemy abilities, skills, passives, what have you. The Boltons, they also get 25% durability. So let's stop for a second. Couple of comments here. We'll get into it more when I get into the second part of the video with the dual faction characters. Right now, unless I am mistaken, I do not believe there are any dual faction characters that are part of the Bolton family, which is really a shame. Because the push now is you can build a single faction team still and have a really good synergy and have it do well. But for the most part, people are really trying to get dual factions because you could see how strong these secondary abilities are. 30% attack, 30% defense, 25% durability. Those are game changers. To get 2 of those, what I call the secondary, because the primary buff is the 25% gem damage. That's standard amongst all factions. To get 2 of those secondary abilities is just a huge bump in power for your team. So for the Boltons, now they said they're going to release going forward more dual faction champions, either new or changes to existing characters. Got to do something quick because the Boltons were sort of an underused faction to begin with. And now you didn't give them any duels, and it's like, why am I building the Boltons again? You got to give people a reason. Other thing I wanted to note is it looks like in these secondary effects, there are only 6 effects. And between the 12 factions, you'd say, oh, well, they'll come in pairs. 2 factions will do attack and 2 will do durability. That's almost entirely true, except I think there are 3 factions that do durability and only 1 that does power. So I don't know if that was an oversight or intentional. It may have been intentional. We'll see that the power boost, because power is extremely powerful, it's in the name, goes to the greens to give them a little bit more offensive punch, and that's sort of their identity. That's sort of what they're known for, big skill damage. But the other thing I want to mention, and we'll see this very shortly, is even with the 2 durabilities that we've seen so far have been at 25%, but when we get to the Lannisters later, they get durability, they get 30. And I don't like in games where, I used to be a big card game player. I don't want one card to clearly be better than the other card. I want there to be balance. So if you have, why would I, other than the other factors of your team composition, of course, but why are the Lannisters getting 30 and the Targaryens and the Boltons are getting 25? And if you're going to do that, give the Boltons 30. Give the lesser used and less popular faction a higher buff, because that might entice some people. If you wanted variety and creativity, well, that might entice some people. Hey, listen, I want that extra 5%. Let me see if I could find a way to use the Boltons. Right now, I have no need for the Boltons. If I want really good durability, I'm going Lannister, and otherwise, I'm going Targaryens, because there's a lot of Targaryens out there, and they're pretty powerful as it is. I don't need any Boltons. They're not giving me anything special. So didn't particularly care for that aspect of the change. Moving on to the Brotherhood, 30% critical strike chance. Let's talk about that for a second. As we've seen in war, we'll often see bonuses for critical strike chance or critical damage. And I always felt critical strike chance is so much more important than critical damage. And the reason for that is the critical damage is irrelevant if you don't get the crit to begin with. Every character has an minimum innate 10% critical strike chance. There are a few characters that will boost it with skills or passives or leadership abilities, and there are some that also have an innate. Icy Viserion has, Beric has, that he'll hit with a higher crit chance. And to go from 10% plus 30%, that's quadrupling the number of your crit strike chances. So to me, and it's not just the additional damage you do. There are plenty of characters. Beric is a perfect example that does additional things when he gains a crit. So to quadruple the chance that you're going to get a crit is, I think, probably it's arguable, but I think it's probably more important than adding 25% durability. Like 25% is 25% across the board. Your durability goes from 100 to 125. It's a 0.25 increase. This is a 400% increase. So something to consider, especially if you have characters that do special things on crits. Red Daenerys, Beric Dondarrion, Icy Viserion, only available right now in PvE, not in Raid or War, but something to think about. Free cities, you'll see here is one of our new dual faction characters. Varys was a member of the Baratheons. He is now Baratheons and Free Cities. Secondary skill, the stamina cost of their skill reduced by 35%, something similar to what the Free Cities had already done. So their skills will be much, much more frequent. Very, very strong buff. The Free Folk, 30% critical strike chance, on par with the Brotherhood. The Greens, as I mentioned before, 25% power. This is the only faction that amplifies power. The Greyjoys. Theon has always been a dual faction character, Stark and Greyjoy. The Greyjoys, stamina cost of their skill reduced 25%, and again, at the risk of being redundant. Free cities are getting this buff at 35%, and the Greyjoys are getting it at 25%. Well, I've seen Free Cities, I omitted them before from Gold 1. There were a bunch of good Free Cities teams. Gave me a lot of trouble before this revamp. So they were a pretty popular faction. The Greyjoys, not so much. I don't see any Greyjoy teams in Gold 1 and haven't for ever. If I see a team in Gold 1 that's got Yara and Euron, I'm chomping at the bit. I can't wait to take them down. And I'm not even saying that they're that bad characters. It's just they didn't have great synergy, and they were pretty easy to beat. So if you're going to have a different percentage on these buffs, give the Greyjoys 35 and the Free Cities 25. Give people a reason to try to be creative and work the Greyjoys into their team. The Lannisters, which we've talked about before, 30% durability. Boltons get 25% and the Targaryens get 25%. The Lannisters have the best durability buff in the game. Benjen Stark is also one of the 8 existing characters that was given a dual faction. Makes sense. He has Stark in his name, and he wasn't a Stark. He was only Night's Watch. He is now properly Night's Watch and Stark. The Night's Watch will get 25% attack. Once again, Baratheons get 30, Night's Watch get 25. Why? There are no Night's Watch teams, especially once they nerfed Brienne and took shield teams off the table. So they should have flip-flopped this. Also to note, this attack buff, I tested this as well. So both the Baratheon attack buff and the Night's Watch attack buff does not work. It does not work for gem damage. It does not work for skill damage. Suppose I should have looked at the Starks while we were on Benjen, but let's just take a look at the Stark bonus, 30% defense on par with the Blacks. And the Targaryens, again, as I mentioned before, but just staying in order, 25% durability. They also changed, I don't think all, but clearly the majority of legendary characters' leadership abilities to what they said they wanted to do was to the extent they took away, and you see this mostly with like the Lannisters, but to the extent that they took away a faction's identity or what they're really good at, they wanted to replace that ability in leadership abilities. So many of the Lannisters now, their old faction bonus was if you had 3, 4, 5 members of the Lannisters, you would start with 3, 4, 5 coins in your treasury. Well, now that's gone. The Lannisters get a 30% durability buff. So where's my starting coins? If your leader on your team, single faction, no faction, dual faction, if it's a Lannister, I think most, I'm not sure if all, but I think most Lannisters have a number of starting coins in their leadership ability. So that's what they've done with that. Is this true for other factions across the board? Not really, but they made a lot of changes to bolster leadership abilities, I guess, to make them feel a little more special or a little more powerful, so that people again will be creative and use different combinations. I'll say this: Zynga did a really nice job when they did the update notes before the revamp went live, where they had like a grid of all the legendary characters whose leadership abilities changed, and they showed side by side their old and their new. And in the new column, they bolded what was changed or what was brand new. So good for them for doing that instead of saying, hey, we changed a bunch of leadership abilities, go check it out. So at least they put the grid together so that you could see at a glance. Now, again, they changed so many that I looked up a handful, and after a while I got dizzy because I just I can't remember 60, 70, 80 legendary, like, and what all the leadership abilities do. So I will learn it slowly over time. But again, they did a really nice job on that. But one that I do want to talk about, even though we don't want to talk about combos too much in this video, the second part of Varus's leadership ability, he always did, up to 5. And again, this scales with number of stars. I've got him at 6 stars, so his leadership ability is maxed. And when a team member drops below 50%, he'll give them stealth for 4 turns. He can do that up to 5 times per battle. I always thought that was pretty good. I didn't really use them because other leadership abilities were better. But this one in the beginning, at the start of battle, Lord Varus scouts all enemies for 4 turns. Now, again, gem damage used to be what the Baratheons were known for, what they were built for. Now every faction gets 25% gem damage, and if you build a dual faction team, you get 50% gem damage. And if you scout all your enemies for 4 turns with 50% gem damage, then all of your gem matches for the first 4 turns of combat will do quintuple damage because it's hitting everyone. It doesn't matter if Dunk's there with Taunt on or Merrin's there with Taunt on. Everyone has Scout on. So far, there are other really good leadership abilities. I don't want to go out on a limb and say Varus is overpowered or is he going to be nerfed? And he might, because I think he's really, really strong. So this is the only one that I wanted to point out in this video. But just so you know, leadership abilities across the board have changed. Let's spend a couple of minutes talking about bugs. I've mentioned before that there may be other faction bonuses that do not work, but from my testing, the attack buff for the Baratheons and the Night's Watch is doing as close to nothing as is possible. 3 or 4 points, 3 points per gem for the Night's Watch, 4 points per gem for the Baratheons, I can tell you that. There was a slight increase to skills. I didn't even bother calculating the percentage. It wasn't even 1%. I mean, I don't think it was even a 1/10 of a percent. It might have been 100th of a percent. I mean, an insignificant amount of adjustment to skill damage. So those two are not working. I did see the power buff on the greens added to not just their skills, but any skills of any members on a team with at least 3 members of the greens. Their skill damage went up. It was a little more than 25%. It was something like 25.3%. I don't know what the rounding error differences was, but it was around 25%. So I know that the power boost works. I know that the gem damage works. I've tested it for a few factions, but not all. The attack bonuses do not, and the others, not sure. Other big thing, Ario Hota. Those of you laughing right now know what I'm talking about. So they changed his leadership ability to do below 5 stars, 25% max true damage, max HP true damage to the enemy leader. At 6 stars, he does 50%. Well, enemy leaders in Raid and War were always there, but in PvE, they either were never there or often not there. And that has changed. When you fight dragons, the dragon is now a leader of its own team. It's a one-member team. They're now leaders. So what happened? Ario does 50% max HP true damage. People with Ario as lead were hitting him for like 12 to 14 million. And this is a major, major problem. I mentioned it earlier. I've seen it all over the general Discord. It's happening in a bunch of guilds that, people, oh, sorry, I didn't know. They hit the dragon for 14 million. Before you know it, the dragon's dead. 29 other members of the alliance or 28 of them haven't had an opportunity to hit, much less make Lord. They can't complete their daily goals. They can't get rewards. We had an argument in Alliance chat that resulted in one of our powerful members leaving as a result of it. And even a few days later, this morning happened again. Somebody, accidentally said that they, oh, I didn't know I used the recommended team and Ario was there. Sorry, I hit for 14 million. And listen, I know this person. I think it's an innocent mistake. But this has been going, we're telling everyone, do not use Ario until it is fixed. Here's my question. It's been 4 days. Why isn't it fixed? Fix it. Fix it. We've seen when Stannis' Iconic was rolling out and he was breaking shields back when shield teams were a thing, he would get 20% stamina. And I posed the question, is it 20% per shield that he breaks? And everyone said, no, no, it's just going to be 20%. Well, guess what? It was 20% per shield that he broke. So on a shield team, when he broke 5 shields, he instantly filled to 100% stamina, and I hit again. And because Brienne replaced those shields, he got to break those shields again. And I hit again and again and again until the shield teams were dead. And we all knew that that was not as intended. And I mentioned it on the official Discord. I don't I don't recall if it was 24 hours or 12 hours. It was fixed very, very quickly when they got rid of gold focus summons that use gold. Have used this example many times in my videos. There was a revolution. People said they were going to quit, and rightly so. They fixed that within definitely within 3 hours or possibly within two. A whole new summon appeared. Didn't seem that tough to program a whole new summon. You're telling me they can't go in and turn off Ario? They can't revert his leadership ability or just drop it down to like 1% just for now. Turn 50% to 1% until you can find a real fix. Or turn off dragons as leaders. Don't make them leaders. Whatever it is, for this to have gone on for 4 days, it is ripping alliances apart at a point where a lot of people are really frustrated with the revamp, very unhappy to begin with. They drop it in the middle of war. They were late with the update, so people didn't know where to deploy because the update didn't come when phase 2 started. People were screaming on Discord, you got to let me know where to tell my people we only have 24 hours to deploy. The rules are going to change. What are they? Are they changing? So, people's nerves are frayed to begin with. A lot of people, I'm sure a lot of people have quit or are taking breaks or they're planning to quit. And now you have this Ariel thing, and 4 days later, they didn't fix it. They also introduced an iconic weapon for Beric. And at some point, he's supposed to spawn power ups. And in the description, it says he spawns 0 power ups. But then when he gets higher, it was increased to also spawn 0 power ups. So, they rushed out an iconic, clearly wasn't working. That they worked on, that they're jumping on. And I got to tell you, why are they fixing Beric's iconic? Because they want people to spend money on Beric. No one's spending money on Ario. Ario's not a revenue producer. And if I'm coming across as being bitter, yeah, I am bitter. Fix that you broke the game. Fix things that broke the game. Don't worry so much that I might make an extra $100 because somebody needs. Everybody's got Beric. Everybody's got Beric was one of the easiest characters to get. I only have him at 5-star. Like a bunch of people have him at probably already have him at 6 or 7. Don't worry about that. Fix the game. You're worried about fixing an iconic weapon for one character as opposed to things that are ripping alliances apart and causing people to quit the game. I mean, not smart. Just not smart. So we've already sort of leaked from the bugs portion to my likes and dislikes. Let's just, you've heard them all already. I don't need to go beyond it. This was a change that didn't need to be made, and they made it. I liked the only thing that I liked so far. I did like that the weekend leading into the change, I did spend a lot of time doing I don't want to say research, but like going over the characters and trying to assemble different teams. And for this war, I used 4 brand new teams. I was new to all of them, and it was fun. It's fun using characters. Now, I didn't have enough silver and bread to level them nearly to the level that I wanted to, but I did well enough this war with these teams. I enjoyed playing them, even with the broken attack bonus for the Baratheons, which really, really hurt me, but I still enjoyed playing these teams. I enjoyed the new characters. I enjoyed sitting there and trying to, well, if I'm going to only use 3 Baratheon, well, where am I putting Melisandre? What about, I don't want Davos on the shelf. I put so much into him. How can I find a way to use him? So I liked that aspect of it. However, that shine, that honeymoon period, that wears off quick because I'm not spending time this weekend looking for new teams. Like I've done that already, and it's fun. And a couple of weeks from now, my new teams will no longer be new. But these things that are broken, gotta fix them. And I've been relatively frustrated in Raid because the team that I've spent time and effort and even a little bit of money building and enjoyed playing, I can't play anymore because they're ineffective. And I know some people say, oh, well, you just change your team. Yeah, sure. I'll just change it to something else and spend another 6 months building that up until they're competent. And then what? Maybe they'll turn the game on its head again. I don't have any faith anymore. With the Greens nerf, before my time was the Stark nerf and the Sansa nerf. Then there's the Brienne nerf. Now there's the everything nerf. And it's just, you keep moving the goalposts in such a way that I don't really consider myself a long-term player anymore. I mean, I was saying I was going to quit the game when they rolled out the faction revamp. I haven't quit yet. I am intending to. I'm going to play a little bit less. I'm going to be a little bit less vocal. Certainly, if they don't fix the bugs. And beyond that, I got to say, like the past week, I haven't had as much fun playing. Bugs aside, just I haven't enjoyed the game as much as I did a week ago. And if for many of us are, I've got a competitive side and I've got a casual side. And for those of you that are competitive and you want to win, like I get that. I get that fire. I've had that my whole life. I like to win. But that aside, I think I and many people we play games to alleviate stress from the real world, to have entertainment, to have fun. And at the moment games become a job or work or a headache, or you have alliance infighting, or you have to start as an officer, I have to start reprimanding people for stepping out of line. I just this has now become work. It's become a slog, and I just again can't make it more clear. I'm really unhappy with the faction revamp. And the last thing I'll say, and then we will wrap this part of the video up, is I said this on the official Discord as well. I was a CPA in public practice for almost 30 years. I worked with a lot of businesses. I have never seen a successful business model where the business ignored the will of its customers, the gripes or the interest of its customers. And I can promise you, this will not be the exception. If your player base is upset and the player base and the customers are saying, do not do this, and they came right out in their revamp notes and said, we've considered everything you said since the beta and we've chosen not to do it. Well, that's just great. So they started before even rolling it out. I was upset. And I wasn't even in the beta. I wasn't even, I couldn't really comment on it because I wasn't in the beta. But how do you come out and say, we hear what our customers are saying, but we know best? Do you now? Because I can tell you what, when a bunch of people that spend money stop spending money, we're going to see who knows best. So personally, I think they killed the game. I think they're going to get a short-term benefit. I even spent $40 last week trying to, I'm trying to build a new team. Just let me give myself a little boost, knowing that I might quit by tomorrow. I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. I'll be open-minded and I'll give it a shot. And again, I haven't quit yet, but it seems like a very short-sighted approach. They're going to get some short-term revenue. And will this game be here in 3 months? And if it is, what kind of will they only have half the player base? And then you know what happens with these games? These quote unquote free apps with the in-app purchases, these gotcha games as they call them. They run their course. They've used up their shelf life. They linger on. They'll linger. It's not going anywhere. It'll be here, but the support stops. There'll be things that break that don't get fixed. The new content stops because these companies go on to the next best thing. They create a new game to make more money. And maybe that's what they're doing here. Maybe they're trying to squeeze that last drop out of the lemon, trying to get the last bit of juice out of the orange, squeeze as much money as they can because they said, you know what? We've run the numbers and people are going to stop spending anyway. So let's squeeze a little bit more out, then move on to the next best thing. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong about this. Comment below. Let me know what you think about the faction revamp, and we will see you in part 2.